Hi everybody, happy Sunday. We love you, we miss you, and we hope that you are doing well. This is our first video for the lesson of Paul. It's a super cool story. We're going to have music, scripture, our story, and an activity, so let's get started. So, let's begin with music. This song that we're going to be learning throughout this entire lesson is one I am sure you have heard before in church. It is called Amazing Grace. Now, we're only going to learn the first verse today because we're going to continue to learn it throughout the weeks as we go over the story of Paul. So, the first line is, Amazing Grace. Can you sing that with me? Amazing Grace. The second line is, how sweet the sound. Let's put it together. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Now the third line is, that saved a wretch like me. That saved a wretch like me. Can we try it all together? Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Now, this is where it gets a little bit different. It goes, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. So these last lines are a little bit different when it comes to the notes we sing, and they're a little bit different when it comes to the words that we sing. So we're going to say, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. And that's the whole first verse. So let's go very slowly and we'll put it all together. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. There we have it. That's the first verse of Amazing Grace. Stay tuned for next week when we will get to learn more of the song. And now, on to our story. Story time! Now, do you remember in the beginning of this video, I said a name? What was that name? If your guess is Paul, you are correct. But our story is about one person who had, at different points in time, two different names. So in the beginning of our story, he's Saul. But at the end of our story, he's Paul. And if that confuses you, good, because we're going to learn all the details in the coming weeks. So let's begin with the very start of our story. Saul to Paul. Saul was a bully. Do you know what a bully is? A bully is somebody who acts really mean to other people, whether it's because they don't like that person or they don't like themselves. But being a bully is more just having the behavior of a mean person, because bullies can grow and learn and not keep that behavior as they get older. Saul was a bully. He hated anyone who was a Christian. Saul wanted all Christians thrown in jail, but God had other plans for Saul. Even though Saul was a mean person, God loved him and had a big surprise for him. What do you think that surprise is? Saul had been ordered to go to Damascus. He smiled slyly to himself. If any Christians lived in Damascus, he would find them. He would arrest them and bring them back to Jerusalem. Saul smiled confidently. He had arrested Christians 100 times before, and he could do it again. Suddenly, swirls of dust blew up from the road. Saul covered his eyes with his arm, so he kind of did like this. Kind of what he's doing in that picture there. Do you see the picture? There we go. Saul covered his eyes with his arm. Storm's coming up, he shouted to his men. Crash, flash, kabash. Saul fell to the ground. See, he's on the ground. A blinding light exploded around him, and a strong voice spoke to him. Saul, Saul, why do you hurt me? Saul rubbed his eyes. He couldn't see anyone. Who are you? Saul stuttered. "I am Jesus," the voice said. "I am not dead. I am very much alive, and I have plans for you. Go into the town and wait." So that's where we're going to leave off for this part of our story, but next week we're going to learn why. And just maybe Miss Gail is going to give you a few clues and a few more insights as to what happens next. So let's listen to her review.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody had a great week. Some wonderful weather, some time to play outside, and maybe even some time to actually see a couple of our friends. We are going to start a new story this week. We're going to start a story, and we're going to talk about for the next few weeks and into the summer about a man. A little bit confusing because this man has two names. Originally, his name was Saul with an S, and Saul was a pretty important person in the city of Jerusalem. And Saul was not happy about this new Christian church. Remember, we said the church had been born. And this is a little bit later, and the disciples in the church had been growing, and they had spread the word to other cities and countries, and the Christian church was really getting to be a pretty, important thing. It was a new thing, and when new things happen, different people react differently to it. There are people who get real gung-ho and they say, yep, we really believe in this. We're going to support this. We're going to go along with it. There are people who are a little more cautious and they said, let's sit back and see what happens. Let's watch it a little bit. Let's, and we'll think about it and, maybe we'll do it later. There are some people who ignore it completely and, they just don't even know what's going on. And don't care. And then there's always somebody who just doesn't like it, who opposes it, who really doesn't want to see it grow or to see it develop, who just wants it to go away and wants to make sure it goes away. And that's the kind of person that Saul was. He did not like the Christian church at all. He was out to make sure that the church didn't thrive, that the church didn't survive, that the people who joined the church were put in prison and they were persecuted or tortured or, just made to be so miserable that nobody else would join the church and, the church would just eventually kind of go away. So Paul found out that there were a lot of people who belonged to the church, who believed in Jesus, who were spreading Jesus' word, that lived in a city called Damascus. And he got permission from, the government, and he and a couple of his friends set off, and they were going to go to Damascus, and they were going to arrest all these people and bring them back to Jerusalem and put them in jail. Well, remember, we don't have cars and trucks and planes and whatever, so they had to walk to Damascus. And he and a couple of his friends set off down the road, and they're walking and they're talking, and they're probably talking about how, ridiculous this church is and how these people need to just, kind of disappear. And all of a sudden, a huge flash of light appears before them, like a big bolt of lightning. And, everybody's, kind of shocked, but Paul is stunned. And he says, who are you? What's going on? What is this all about? And he hears a voice. And the voice says, "This is Jesus. I am the man that you are so terribly against. It's my church, it's my followers, it's my people that you are trying to hurt so badly. And I'm really not, pleased with that. So, and Saul says, well, what do you want me to do? And Jesus says, I want you to go to Damascus, just like you planned, but instead of arresting my people, or instead of arresting my church, I want you to just sit and wait, and someone will give you some instructions. Someone will tell you what to do. And Saul says, okay. And he gets up, and there's a problem. He is blind. He can't see a thing. And he's afraid. I mean, wouldn't you be? All of a sudden, you've been seeing things all your life. All of a sudden, you can't see a thing. But he has his companions, his friends that are with him. They take him by the hand. They lead him to the city of Damascus, and they find a place to stay. And there he has to wait for someone to tell him what he needs to do next. Guess we'll just have to stay tuned and come back next week.
Thank you, Miss Gail. That was awesome. Now let's hear some scriptures from Miss Jane.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you're enjoying these beautiful sunny days like today. As we start our new lesson about a man named Saul, our scripture reading today is from the book of Acts, chapter 9, verses 1 through 9. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? Saul asked. I am Jesus whom you are persecuting, he replied. Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sound, but did not see anyone. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus. For 3 days he was blind, and he did not eat or drink anything. Stay tuned and see what happens next week. Until then, take care, stay well, and remember that we miss you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Miss Jane. That was beautiful. Now, do any of you have any guesses as to why this happened to Saul and what maybe was going to happen next? Now you have a few ideas as to what happened next after Saul heard the voice of Jesus, but we're going to talk about our activity and find out what happens next week. So, for our activity this week, I'm going to need you to grab a piece of paper, a pencil or a pen or a crayon or a marker or anything you have available to you. And I want you to think back to a time that you can remember that somebody wasn't very nice to you. Because we've all had those experiences, because not everybody feels very kind all the time. Sometimes people are in a bad mood or something happened to them and they just didn't treat you very well. So I want you to think to a time that happened. And I want you to draw that picture. Where were you? What was the weather like? What did you see? Were you at school? Were you at home? Were you at the playground? Were you on a play date? Draw the picture for me of when something didn't exactly go right and somebody wasn't very nice to you. And I want you to draw this picture, and on the back, I want you to write what happened next. Did that person apologize? Were you able to tell that person, hey, that wasn't very nice what you just said to me, or that wasn't very nice what you just called me. Is something going on? Are you okay? What did you do to solve the situation? What did you do to react to the situation with love and with kindness? And I want you to think about that, because as we learn more about Saul's story, we're going to see what happened to him that perhaps made him want to change his ways and not be such a bully. Alrighty, that wraps up our lesson, our very first lesson for the story of Saul to Paul. So stay tuned so we can see what happens next after that big light came down upon him and after he heard the voice of Jesus. So stay tuned, everybody, stay well, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye!